I hope as we continue with these meetings, we just want to do a little bit of just kind of get to know each other a little bit better. And so I came up with that idea. I found out my sheet that I had 2 years ago from 2017. You can still see it's all folded and worn. But Pastor Bill had put together a little song sheet, and he will do that for you guys as well. And then on the back was like when we go through the affirmation of baptism and Holy Communion. So Pastor Bill brings his little travel guitar, and different places you'll see other tour groups singing at different locations. And is it in Jerusalem, Anne's Church, St. Anne's Church?
Yes.
That that the acoustics are amazing. So we're going to just do a little song, and I don't know what song you'd like to do.
We're going to do We're Marching in the Light of God. You guys all know this. You don't need words because it's very easy. And one of the things, just to chime on to what Julie said, is at St. Anne's Church in Jerusalem, which is kind of the start of the Via Dolorosa. You'll learn more about that church in a future session, but the acoustics are the most unbelievable you've just ever heard. It's like you're going to feel like you're in heaven. No joke. And you'll feel that way even more so because we have a lot of really good singers in this group.
Thank goodness.
So, but did I already say this? I don't know if I said this to you, but out of grace and compassion for the priest who ushers all the tour groups in every day, 24, 7 days a week, whatever, and every group sings what song?
Amazing Grace.
This person doesn't want to hear Amazing Grace anymore, even though it's a fabulous hymn. So we're going to sing some other things, and so we're going to try and memorize some things, but we will have a sheet. So we're going to sing We're Marching in the Light of God. We'll do marching, praying, and singing. We are marching in the light of God. 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 We are marching, we are marching, we are marching in the light of God. We are marching, we are marching, we are marching in the light of God. Singing. We are singing in the light of God. 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 We are singing, we are singing, we are singing in the light of God. We are singing, we are singing, we are singing in the light of God. Praying. We are praying in the light of God. 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 We are praying, we are praying, we are praying in the light of God. We are praying, we are praying, we are praying in the light of God. Wow, I already got goosebumps. We're not even in St. Anne's. Very cool. That was beautiful. So we will be singing that and many others. All right, so I'm on?
You're on.
Ready to roll. Okay. Day 6. We are headed to Jerusalem. In the background there, you can see we're standing out on the Mount of Olives, looking across the Kidron Valley into Jerusalem. And this will be a day where we don't spend time in Jerusalem necessarily, but we'll get to our hotel and we'll probably end the day with the sight of Jerusalem, I'm pretty sure. So we're going to go back to where we've been. We have been a couple of days now up in the Sea of Galilee, which, as we've been teaching, is the main place that Jesus did all of his ministry. We're going to, if all goes right, we're going to say farewell to the Sea of Galilee by going up to the top of Mount Arbel, which is, mountains. Just remember, these are mountains, not like Olympic mountains. Hill Arbel or whatever. And it's a beautiful view down behind me in the projection. It is actually Magdala down there where we were, and then over further to the left is Capernaum off in the distance. And this is just the main area, this kind of top, I guess you'd say the northwest of the Sea of Galilee is where Jesus does all of his ministry. So we've talked a lot about those sites, and so we're going to say goodbye to that beautiful green, lush area, and we're going to head to the Judean desert. Because down in Jerusalem, it looks more like this. And we're going to start off by going to a place that I've not been yet in my travels. And it's called Jericho. Now, you guys have heard about Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, Jericho, Jericho. Joshua fought the battle of Jericho, and the walls came tumbling down. Anyway, all right, we got it. So, now, this is not the walls of Jericho. So I want to do a little bit of instruction and teaching on Jericho. It's very significant and interesting. It's not the current, where we're going to be is not the Old Testament location of Jericho. That Jericho was destroyed, and here for your cards, if you're making your cards, you can put down Joshua 6:26 and then 1 Kings 16:34. In Joshua 6:26, in that whole area is the conquest of when after the people had wandered in the wilderness for 40 years, and Moses dies, and Joshua is going to take them into the promised land. Jericho is one of the first and important battles that they undergo. Now, a great thing for us to talk about on the bus and as we go is this whole difficult concept of like holy war, like a group of people conquering another people. But I want to give you just a little bit of an interesting take on that event, because that is the beginning. That's what Jericho was about, was the people receiving the land that God had promised them. There were people living there already. However, it's interesting what we know about the Canaanite system, the people living in the land, when Joshua, by the way, that was a good slip. You know why? It means Joshua. Jesus is the Greek of the Hebrew Joshua. Did you know that? Yeshua is the way it sounds in Hebrew. So Jesus and Joshua, same name. Jesus is the Greek. Yeshua is the Hebrew. So we know Jesus by Jesus, but in Hebrew it would have been Yeshua. And the Hebrew word means the one who saves. Exactly. The one who saves. So in this modern day where we've got our own history in this country with Native American peoples, and we've got people fighting over the land all over the world and stuff, it's a tough concept. But just briefly, because I don't have a ton of time, I want you to think about Canaanite society. This was a feudal state. You had a king who basically enslaved the people that were there. They did all kinds of other bad stuff I won't mention. We got young kids here, so it was tough. It was tough living, and the king ruled. That was the way it was. Now, let's say you were one of these folks living in one of these little city-states, and you were one of those slaves, and you heard about a group of people who had been wandering out in the desert for 40 years, that God had delivered from the Pharaoh, and had even beaten up the Pharaoh. How do you think you're going to be thinking about those people coming into the land? If you were one of those folks, you want to be like, wow, this is great. And so I want you to think about the conquest, not just as a taking over, but also a bit of a liberating force. This is a point that John Bright makes If you want a wonderful history of the Old Testament, it's very detailed, it's very in-depth. John Bright, A History of the Old Testament, I think is the name of the book. It's a classic. So anyway, we're going to go we don't know for sure where the Old Testament site is. Because in 1 Kings 16, Joshua 6:26, no one should ever rebuild the city, Joshua said. It should never be rebuilt. Well, somebody tried in 1 Kings 16, so this is later on in the history of Israel. Someone tried and it didn't go up. Let's just say that. So we don't know exactly where the Old Testament Jericho is. However, what you are looking at there in the background is a tower that, if I've got it right, was the top of a tower that was a part of the New Testament Jericho. Because as you're going to see in just a minute, we have lots of New Testament events that are talked about with Jericho. So Jericho had been rebuilt, but a different place. Very similar area. So you're going to have a good concept of what did the area look like. But it's not the exact spot. This is the top of a huge tower. So what does that tell you? Things have gotten filled in. And so, for kids especially too, so when a city was destroyed, like by an earthquake, or maybe another country came in and they were after the city, and they would be destroyed, they would just fill it in and rebuild. Destroyed, earthquake or something. They didn't have the ability to take stuff away that much. But then, so you have these mounds that would build up. So this is the top of what was a tower in Jesus' day, in the New Testament times. So you'll see this a lot, even Jerusalem, where we're going to walk the path where Jesus walked to the cross. We're really walking, 40, 50 feet above where he walked. Now we'll have the opportunity to go down where they've excavated, and we'll actually have a short little spot where we'll walk on, most likely the actual pavement that Jesus walked when he went to the cross. So know that that's just a dynamic you have to deal with. One thing when we get there, it'll be exciting. The pools of Siloam, and then in the Gospel of John, we've discovered these, and they've excavated, but you have to look way down, because in Jesus' day, ground was way down. So the city's been rebuilt so many times on top. So just know that there's that concept. So what New Testament events? So here's some things for your cards. Yes, please, question, Lisa.
That's okay, you were talking about Jerusalem and the pools of Siloam, not Jericho.
Not Jericho. Sorry, I jumped. Yep. It's just as an example, we'll see this when we get to Jerusalem a lot, where, the stuff that was going on in Jesus' day is, buried way down. But they've excavated that in a lot of places. So, okay, so blind Bartimaeus. This is an important event. I'm just going to get all of these up here. And this happens in Jericho. So let me just see here if I can pull up. I'll pull that other slide up in just a minute. Let me just do some tools here and go to Atlas and pull up a map. You've got maps in your deal that probably have Jericho there, but let's see, I want to go down beyond the Jordan. Here we go. So, but even if the map you have you don't quite have this on there. Let's see, we got Jericho. American Village. So this is probably close enough. So you can see here that we're up here in the Sea of Galilee, and we're going to be driving down. You have to drive on this side, pretty sure, as I remember where the road is. And then we're going to drive down in here. We're not going to go into Jerusalem right away. We're going to go to Jericho, which is right next to Jerusalem, very close. So you'll have a sense geographically, wow, okay, when it says Jesus went to Jericho, I kind of know, I have a picture now of what that looks like and feels like. So that's just a little bit of a map. Jericho's right in here close to Jerusalem. Just a FYI there on that. So, blind Bartimaeus, a healing happens in Jericho. Remember that famous, who was in the tree? Zacchaeus. There's a song for that too. Zacchaeus was a wee little man was he. So maybe we'll sing that when we get to Jericho. Jericho's involved in that story. Let's just take a quick look at that. Here we go. Jesus entered, oh yes, Jeannie, there you got a chair, good. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. So this whole story happens in the Jericho of the New Testament times. He was a chief tax collector and was rich, and he was seeking to see who Jesus was. But on account of the crowd, he could not, because he was small in stature. So he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone into the guest of a man who is a sinner. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, let's stop there though. Why were they upset that Jesus went into a house of someone who was known as a sinner? And what was his sin? What do you think? No?
Greed. He was supporting the Romans, collecting taxes from them.
Okay, so he's a tax collector, and this is something that's important for everybody to get to. So tax collectors in Jesus' day, they had a lot of flexibility. So they could take what the Caesar needed and take whatever they thought they should get paid. So the people, I mean, the IRS isn't very popular today. I mean, I'm not saying, if some of you work for the IRS, thank you, it's a great service. But they were especially not popular in Jesus' day. So yes, sinner. Why else, but why would, what's a problem with Jesus going to the person's house?
Because isn't that some of these sinners are tax collectors were not allowed in the temple or anything else?
Yes, Gentiles certainly, there was a place for Gentiles, but they could only go so far. And yes, you were supposed to purify yourself and all of that. You're close, you're right in there. Why is it a problem for Jesus to go to this guy's house? Why do you think?
It's like now with social media, you click like, so it's like saying, well,
he's liking.
Yeah.
He's clicking like. That's
Yeah.
a great analogy.
yeah.
Well, the host, it was an important role.
So when you had someone over for dinner, or you went over to their house, that was more than like we have, like we're, just come on over for dinner. In this culture, that meant friendship, that meant connection, the whole thing. And then we got to throw on the way Middle Eastern culture works even to this day, but especially in this time, this patron-client kind of relationship. When I have a dinner, I would typically invite someone of higher stature than me to pledge my loyalty to them, and I would invite maybe people of lower stature than me to say, and for them to be able to promise their patronage to me. So there was all this kind of scratching your back, you scratch mine stuff going on. Well, Jesus goes and says, I'm coming to your house. For that people, that meant one, he was liking them. One, he was almost giving his approval for him, or bringing him into the circle, to Jesus' circle. How can Jesus do that to a person that's doing unrighteous, bad stuff? So this is something, especially in the Gospel of Luke. Luke really, as he writes his story, he really wants us to see, hey, look what Jesus did. He transcended these bounds. And that's really the gospel. That's the truth for all of us, right? None of us, are of a stature that, okay, look, we earn God's grace, but Jesus crosses those boundaries. So when we get to Jericho, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about that when Jesus did this act, that he really upset some folks. But look what happens for Zacchaeus. And Zacchaeus, people are upset about this. Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, Behold, Lord, the half of My goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I will restore it fourfold. So Zacchaeus hears the good news just by Jesus showing up. And it kind of changes him. And Jesus said, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. This is an interesting, little phrase. He's also a son of Abraham. Did that mean he wasn't a Gentile, but he was a Jew who was a tax collector? That's some stuff that we can dig down into as we go forward. But I want you, now you'll have a place with this great story, famous story of Zacchaeus, right? All right, questions or comments about that? Thoughts? Yes. Please, Lisa. Oh.
Do you think, they also didn't wanna go to his house? I mean, would that have been a public event, and then he
Yeah,
was
like
an outcast, and they were like, we're not going there.
yeah, right.
We don't wanna
Yeah.
ally with him.
That's a great question, because I'm wondering if who's with them at this point. Let's see. Let's go up in front. And immediately, let's see. So a healing story. Immediately he recovered his sight, followed him, glorifying God, and all the people, when they saw it, gave praise to God. So he's got folks following him, So he entered Jericho and was passing through. So yeah, maybe the people with him are like, we're not going there. Yeah, please.
I just wanted to point out that fourfold, I can't remember what the legal rule is. If you defraud someone, you have to double your payment, and fourfold is more.
That's even way more. You're
Yeah.
you're absolutely right about that. Yeah. So he's going,
Really
he's doubling.
repenting.
Yes, he's really repenting. Yes, please.
It looks to me like he bought his salvation. They skipped the step where he sort of accepted who Jesus was and just went straight to paying for it.
But I think it's in the present tense as if he's already doing that. Is this saying that he was a righteous tax collector? That
I think it's the
it sounds to me like I already give it to the poor, and
Interesting.
Great question.
Which translation are you using?
This is the ESV. I can put it in the NRSV. Well, let's see. What was it? 19:3. Yeah. Or the NRSV. 19:3.
I will.
I will pay back 4 times as much. You guys have put your finger on a translation issue. So the verb is actually present tense, active, indicative. So, but the indicative could be like future action, present and future action versus past. So I'll have to do some digging on that. That's cool. So, yeah, because see, such a Lutheran, Craig, that I am, I say, well, he had this experience of Jesus accepting him, and so then he wanted to respond. So that tense is important, isn't it? So when we go to Israel, I'll have figured that out. No, that's great. That's really cool. We can do some more digging down on that. So, yeah. Today salvation has come to this house. This is the part. For the Son of Man came to seek out and save the lost. So Zacchaeus is one of those lost folks that Jesus, came for. Yeah, good. Other questions or yeah, good. All right. Well, you've given me some homework to do. All right, good. Look at this story. Everybody knows the Good Samaritans. Or does everybody? This is that great story that Jesus tells in Luke 10, 30 through 37, that all the hospitals are named after. So Luke 10, 30 through 37, that's on the road to Jericho. Now, I'm not going to read the whole story because we don't have time to do the whole story, but I want you to remember how it starts out. Behold, a lawyer stood up to put Jesus to the test. In Middle Eastern culture, this is an honor-shame situation. This is they're trying to tear Jesus' honor and stature down by defeating him in debate. And so they're trying to throw him a curveball. Teacher, what shall we do to inherit eternal life? So notice he says, what shall we do? There you go, Craig. There's the, can he earn salvation? He said to him, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And he answered, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, with all your strength, all your mind, your neighbor as yourself. That, by the way, the neighbor as yourself is from Leviticus, and this other one is from Numbers. Pretty sure it's Numbers, but anyway, so this is a bringing together of two Old Testament texts as a summary of the law. And he said to him, you've answered correctly, do this and you'll live. Okay, so Jesus kind of plays into his little question, do this and you'll live. But the lawyer, desiring to justify himself, said to Jesus, and who is my neighbor? So, you know, if you're making notes or writing in your card, the concept of neighbor in Jesus' day, we think, well, who, like if I asked you, who's your neighbor? Who does it include? Who does it include?
Anybody on Lacey Street,
Anybody on Lacey Street? Yeah.
which is one block long.
Right, that's it though, right? Okay, but yeah, so how would you confine who your neighbor is? Do you have limits to who your neighbor is when you think about it today? Like, for instance, are the people in Tacoma my neighbors? Should I care about them?
Yeah.
I mean, what about the people who are, you know, on just minimum income, Social Security, and just striving to keep food? Should I care about them? Are they my neighbor? We would probably say yes, right? So neighbor for us is not just the people living next door, people across the world. So we typically have an expansive, maybe we don't, but we typically, when we think of Jesus saying love your neighbor, in Jesus' day, rabbis taught that Gentiles were not your neighbor. They were very clear about that. So this commandment doesn't apply to Gentiles. So Jesus tells this story about this Samaritan, you know, this guy who's beaten up, left for dead along the road, and these guys that come passing by who are Jewish, they're priests or Levites, and they're, you know, and they ignore the guy that's beaten up, right? And we think they're just too busy. But there's more to it than that, because they were headed to the temple to do their thing, which they didn't get to do all that often, but they got paid for. This was their job. And if that guy along the side of the road was dead and they touched him, they wouldn't be able to work for, I think it's like at least a month, because you become unclean. So it's a little bit more than just I got somewhere to go, I'm a little busy. It's more intense than that. But they pass by, and then the Samaritan is the hero. He doctors him up, takes him in. And Jesus ends the story. You know, which one of these showed mercy? Or he, you know, says, which one proved to be a neighbor? And the guy has to say, the one who showed him mercy. And Jesus said to him, go and do likewise. I think it's interesting that the guy was trying to justify himself, and Jesus raised the bar pretty high here. But nonetheless, who's the hero of the story? Not a trick question. Samaritan, right? Good. Now, how did Jewish people think about Samaritans?
They didn't like
They were low. They were worse than the low.
They're worse than the Jewish woman and livestock than Samaritans.
They were way down there. Because the Samaritans were an offshoot of their own religion. They had different scriptures. They only had the first 5 books of the Bible. They believed that you should worship up on Mount Horeb and not down in Jerusalem. They were kind of the people who had perverted their religion. And so there was not happiness with the Samaritans. They were definitely not your neighbor.
They're like heretics.
They were heretics. Absolutely. They were heretics, and so Jesus tells a story about this road from Jerusalem to Jericho. So now you'll have a place to think about this. There used to be, and I think there might even still be, they might show us a little inn that was, you know, by legend, the place where the Samaritan, you know. Yeah, right, the Samaritan, yeah. So, you know, Jesus may have just told, this just may be a parable, you know. But, you know, it certainly could have happened. It's a dangerous road, you know, from Jerusalem to Jericho, you know, so, anyway. So, he tells the story where the hero is the enemy of the people. That's, you think, how do you, he said, the one who showed him mercy, you know, he could not have been happy about that. You know. So it's a powerful parable. We may get a chance to probe it some more. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, and that's associated with Jericho as well.
It's kind of like
Please.
it's kind of like when Nathan told that story to David about the lamb,
Yes,
you know,
nice.
darn it, that's
Yes, he kind of, Kim's referring to the story where David's done, you know, adultery and murder, and he's done some really bad things, but he's kind of in denial about it, and he tells him a story about this rich guy who took this poor man's sheep, even though the rich man had all these sheep to choose from, and kills the poor man's sheep because he needs it for his guests. David says, the person that just, you know, did this deserves to die, and Nathan says, that's you, because that's what David did, and it, you know, convicts him. Well, yeah, I really do see this. It's like, oh man, I'm trying to justify myself now. Who's my neighbor and who's not? Because that was the question rabbis would teach. Because I want to get to heaven by doing all the right things. So just tell me who my neighbor is, I'll do it, and I'll be done. And Jesus explodes that whole notion. And it isn't a matter of who, it's how you be neighbor to other people. So
But the victim was Jewish though, right? I mean, isn't that understood?
that would be assumed, I think. Yes. How about you? What do you think?
Someone pointed this out one time, because he was stripped, obviously, so he's naked. Jews are circumcised, the Samaritan would have seen that, so I'm sure they didn't feel real happy about the Jews either. So.
Oh, right. So the Samaritan, let's not lose that angle of the story too. That's excellent.
Or it was
That he would have been just as upset, and there was this anti-feelings went both ways. They both were each other's enemies. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
But it was a Missouri Synod pastor that said that, so how much you want to put on that?
Oh, I think it's very true then, for sure. They're pretty serious about their, Bible stuff. Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. I think that makes a lot of sense.
I don't believe we'll be able to see it on this tour, but there's two groups of Samaritans still living in Israel. One's on the West Bank, and then there's one in Israel. I believe it's close to Tel Aviv or.
So thank you for mentioning it, because we're going to have lunch at a Druid little restaurant, and I think there's some talk that they might have some connection, and the guide will teach you all about. I'm not an expert on them. It's a great lunch. It's just really good training and stuff.
That was the best hummus.
That was the best hummus. That's right. So there might be a connection with that, but for the most part. I don't know if people think that they're... Okay, we've got a number of other stops to make yet on this particular day. We're going to just really enjoy working through some of these beautiful stories on this trip. But for your card and just your reading, so you can equate Bible passages, stories with places, there you go. Those are important. So in this same day, in this area, and I don't know when we're going to do the affirmation of baptism in the Jordan, but we might have already done that. We're going to stop near, because we have to cross the Jordan, so probably, I don't have it, it's probably going to be the first thing after Mount Arbel and we come down, we'll be doing an affirmation of baptism. We'll go down in a section of the Jordan that's very possible that Jesus was baptized in. There's different places people think. The gospel writers don't tell us exactly what. They tell us John the Baptist was off in the wilderness, so that's where one would think it might be lower and not higher up in the Sea of Galilee, but then people make arguments for that too. But anyway, we'll be in a spot, and if someone on our trip wants to be baptized who's never been baptized, we can do that. But we will have a chance to affirm our baptism for those who wish to do that. It won't be like some force thing or anything. But we'll have a little get-together at the Jordan so you can see what that looks like. And the place that I think we're going to go, there's a fence down the middle of the Jordan, which separates Jordan from Israel. Jordan and Israel get along very well, though, just so you're aware of that. But so we'll do that most likely on the way to Jericho. But that part I'm not sure of. So the other thing that's in this area is a monastery that's been built on the possible site of the temptation of Jesus. We know that Jesus went out in the Judean desert. Remember I showed you that picture? Well, this is out in the desert, and this is a pretty significant, you might say, cliff, mountain. We're not going to, don't worry, I have height issues, so. But there is the opportunity for us to go up on a cable car to this monastery. In the background you see the monastery there, and which I really love to look at these old monasteries, and so we can do some with that, but it'll be a neat ride up there. And if you remember in the temptation of Jesus, and that is over here, Matthew 4:1. So you can write, if you want to make a new card, maybe even just say Mount of Temptation or something like that. Or if you want to keep it on, if you're doing one card per day or something, you can do that. But this is the Mount of Temptation, and the temptation stories are Mark 1:12-13, Matthew 4:1 and following, and Luke 4:1 and following. So it's in all three. The temptation story is in all three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's not in John. So in Matthew it says, then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And, you know, I'll just give a quick review of these, that Jesus seems to be, he's out there for how long? 40 days. How long were the people of Israel in the wilderness?
40 years.
Okay, so they're 40 years, 40 days. It seems like Jesus goes out and he does what Israel couldn't do. In the wilderness, Israel, blunder after blunder, complaint after complaint, and they don't make it through, but Jesus seems to go out and he does what they couldn't do. Which, to me, Jesus fulfills the mission of Israel being a blessing to be a blessing type of thing. So we get these specific temptations, and maybe we'll read one of these when we're up there. Because what happens in the last temptation, again, the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor, and said to him, all these I'll give to you if you fall down and worship me. And Jesus says, away with him, for it is written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. So, you know, I don't know what the tradition was, how far it goes back, that this high up mountain was the place that maybe Jesus was taken. And it doesn't matter if it's the place, but, you know, you'll have now a visual of what that might have looked like for Jesus. So we'll probably read this when we go up there and do a little bit more in-depth study on that. But, yeah, please.
Do you remember how old the monastery is?
I don't. See, this is part that we haven't done before. So
We've never been.
we have not been to this locale.
What's the name?
What is it called?
It is.
Is it St. George?
Yeah, it is called St. George Monastery on the Mount of Temptation.
Yeah, so that'll be a fun history thing, because we can also then think about some history of the monastic movement, and you know, we can learn a little bit more about that and whatnot. So that'll be fun to do, and it's a neat cable ride. We get to do two of those. Okay, this is a little bit closer picture of the monastery up there in the cliffs of the mountain. So, yep.
Do you know if all the monasteries there are Catholic or some of them Orthodox?
I believe there are Orthodox monasteries, yes, and then there's different kinds of the Catholic too. So, but yeah, I have not studied up much on St. George's. So, But I'm excited to be, you know, in that area. So, all right, one more. Bethany is another place we'll visit just briefly. And this is a place that Jesus bounces back and forth from. It's almost a resting place for him. And some stories, just to connect place with biblical stories. So when you're there, you know, you're not thinking, now, what was Bethany about? So think of the great stories with Martha and Mary and Lazarus. That's where they lived, is in Bethany. So especially for all the gals, the women here today, one of my favorite stories is where Jesus comes to Martha and Mary's house, and Jesus comes in, and Mary is busy doing hospitality, which is great, but Martha has taken a different position. She is kneeling at Jesus' feet. Now, today we go like, well, was she worshiping? What was it? To sit at someone's feet was saying she was in his classroom. She was going to school. So here's a woman in Jesus' day, and in Jesus' day, women didn't get educations, and they were not, you know, they were way down the ladder of importance. And Jesus has Martha taking the bold step of sitting and listening to Jesus. And Jesus does not say, hey, Mary, you should be in with Martha helping out. He says to Martha, Mary has done the right thing. And so it's just a beautiful story. We might talk about it at Magdala a little bit, because Magdala, like we mentioned last week, is going to be a place where we really celebrate the women followers of Jesus, and how Jesus looked at women very much differently than the culture of his day and the history that he follows. So that's a great story. That's Luke 10:41. Then we also hear about the raising of Lazarus, who is the brother of Martha and Mary. So Jesus is very close to this family, and that's in Bethany. So he visits there frequently. And the raising of Lazarus is an incredibly amazing story. And I haven't decided which one. I'll probably focus on that when we're there. We'll do a little Bible study on that. So, let's see. Let me just show you a couple of really interesting things about that to just whet your appetite for that. Let's see. That's the anointing. Let's see. No. So we'll just talk to you about that one, and then we'll do the anointing one. So Jesus hears about Lazarus, and he goes, and this is that great story where Lazarus been dead for a long time, and he's going to go in the tomb. Well, when we're in Bethany, there is a tomb we'll go down into and see, and of course we don't know if this was exactly the tomb, but it does help you see what it looked like in that day and what a burial would have looked like. And so that's going to be a helpful visual for you in this story. But this is the last miracle in the Gospel of John. So in the Gospel of John, chapters 1 through 11 basically they call the book of signs. Jesus does all kinds of things. And you go, oh my goodness, who is this guy? Well, this is the last and greatest sign. He raises somebody from the dead. And he's been dead long enough that they're worried it's going to be not very pleasant, let's just say, when he goes in. And this is that great story. He says, Lazarus, come out, and he comes out. And then he tells the people to unbind him and let him go. So it's a really great, powerful story there in Bethany. One that's really a beautiful thing that happens in Bethany as well is before Jesus' passion. So in John 12, 1 through 8, and I've got it up there, Mark 14, 3 through 9, and Matthew 26, 6 through 13, there is this woman who barges in. Who's Mary, of Mary and Martha, barges in and anoints Jesus at Bethany. So 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus raised from the dead. Oh, let me just say one other thing. Of all the things that in the Gospel of John, the thing that gets Jesus crucified or killed is the raising of Lazarus. At that point, they just say, we got to put this guy to death. In the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Jesus cleanses the temple, and he does some of those things. And so we only hear about this raising of Lazarus in the Gospel of John. But that's just an important detail. So they gave a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one who was reclining with them at table. Can you imagine that? You know, here's this guy who was dead, and now he's hanging out with Jesus. Yeah. Mary therefore took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii? That is a lot of money. A denarius was a day's wage for a laborer. So that was almost a year's wages for a laborer. And given to the poor." I mean, that's a good objection. It's like, come on. That wasn't practical. He said this not because he cared, this is John's narrative now, not because he cared about the poor, because he was a thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put into it.
He's a typical tax collector.
Well, yeah, he wasn't a tax collector, but John is putting the, giving us his view of why Judas said that. Yeah. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." So this is a powerful moment in Jesus' life. He has a very clear sense, in my view, according to the Gospels, of what's ahead for him. Especially that's true in John. And Mary does this amazingly beautiful gift and anoints him for the day of his burial. Now the story is a little bit different in each Gospel, but it's one that we hear about in all three of them. Or, let's see. Well, I got the ESV. It's not going to tell me, but well, let's see. Maybe there you go. So Matthew 26, 6, and then Mark 14, 3 through 9. So it's a little bit different, but that's another thing that happens in Bethany.
Is that Mary Magdalene?
No, this is Mary, a different Mary.
I can't keep track of Mary, the mother of James.
I know, you got all these Marys. Mary was like the name John, or what's a good female name
So this is
today?
the only
Christine.
story that this Mary is in, is this stuff going on in Bethany.
Yes,
The
yes.
friend of
So
Martha
this
Mary.
is the Mary of Mary and Martha, the Mary, the brother, the sister of Lazarus.
Okay.
Yes, yep.
Which one was at his feet, Mary or Martha? Mary.
When at his passion?
No, at the,
Oh,
when-
here?
who was doing the dishes and who was doing?
Oh, Martha was doing the dishes and Mary was doing the student.
So the way I remember that is Martha has more letters, so she's doing more work. That's
Yeah.
the way I don't know how that's forever, because I got it confused, like I had to come up with something, so.
Oh, that's
More
great.
letters, more
That's
work.
great. How many of you are Marthas? How many of you are Marys? Probably more Mary-ish. Peek over here.
It depends on if Martha's doing the dishes or not.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, good. Yeah, so Mary is a very common name. Very common. Probably the most common female name. So, yep. All right, good. So, those are the things that's happening. So then, what happens after that is we're going to drive to our hotel in Jerusalem. And this is a picture from the Mount of Olives, but there's another spot where buses typically pull over and look, and you get your first look at the Holy City, at Jerusalem, and then we'll stay the night So that is kind of, it's gonna be a travel day, a busy day, lots of different places. But really, it's a neat experience to drive from the north to the south, because you see the difference. You know, it's green and lush up in the Sea of Galilee, and it gets dark. Did I see a hand? Nope. Okay. George, please.
Oh, hi. When you were talking about Lazarus' burial, his grave, or whatever, do you get the impression when you're over there that there's a lot of tourist trap kind of places?
There's no question. Thanks for that. That's a great question. And since we have just a minute or two before 1:30, what you're doing now, and one of our big jobs, and your tour guide will be to help you make your way through the tourist stuff. It is, you know, tourism, just like anywhere, you know, is a huge thing. It's economically really significant. And so when we visit places, when it's like, well, we're not really sure if this was it or it would have been like this, we're going to tell you that. Now, some of the people aren't maybe going to tell you that because they want you to come there and, you know, this type of thing. But yeah, the tourism is hard to negotiate through without some good, and that's what Faith Expeditions does a great job, and our tour guide's going to do a great job helping us get through and really get to the ground, I guess you could say, really to make those connections, George. So yeah, there's plenty of places. Well, like in Joppa, where we'll be in the first day we're there. You know, there's a spot where maybe it was Peter, the tanner. You know, the tanners of very unlikely, but they've got the sign over it saying, you know, this was where Peter, you know, was, or the tanner was, you know. So there's plenty of that, but that's where we'll be really clear with you, you know, yeah. When you have, you know, they rank, each of these sites are ranked, well, this is like 25% possibly the spot, or, you know, so when you get up to 80-90%, you know, you can really, but even the 25%, at least you have maybe the geography, just like Jericho. It's like, okay, really the town doesn't exist anymore, but this was the lay of the land, and this is what it looked like. Yeah.
Is this Bethany beyond Jordan, the Bethany you were?
Yes, yes. That is the Bethany that we're talking about. That would be it. Because it's right down by Jerusalem, correct? Yes.
Well,
yeah.
south
Jericho,
of
south of Jericho. Yes, please.
Will we need international plugs for electrical stuff or not?
That's a great question too. You're gonna, I know it'll be coming soon because I talked to Russ just not too long ago. You will get one charger.
An adapter.
An adapter.
Okay.
Thank you.
For
It's not a charger. It's an
we have to get
adapter.
it, or
Yeah.
No.
It's
It's
gonna
part
be
of
sent.
your,
You're gonna get
what
a
you
packet.
purchase with your tour,
Yeah.
you get a
Yeah.
free adapter.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the Adams family's gonna get like, they're gonna have a lot. You need an extra adapter. We're talking to them. They're gonna have like
They're gonna be
6 of
for
them.
sale. College
Yeah, it's like for
education.
the highest bidder, because the Israel adapter is different than the European adapter. I mean, you can go online and figure it out and buy more.
Adapter H.
Adapter H, that's exactly it. George is on top of it. So you'll get one for that. Yes. Just another quick thing. There is Wi-Fi on the bus. So a lot of times people will ask, and might be a time you start to investigate. I did the Data International plan that AT&T has. I might do it again, but boy, the data goes fast. So I think AT&T's now is like $10 a day, and it's the same data plan you have here. So it's probably that. I don't know if Verizon what they have.
Verizon doesn't
So you might want to do that, because we'll make a rule with the bus that if you don't need the internet, don't get on it, because it's one of those things where if everybody gets on, it doesn't work. But if just a few people get on, it works. So if you have to check internet, of course all the hotels will have Wi-Fi and that type of thing. So yeah, we'll talk more about that. So I go on a tangent here.
Do I get to interject?
You get to interject, please. Oh, I'm sorry, did we have things? Oh, we need to talk about the schedule. Yes, let's get to that. I went too long.
So that's okay. On today's January 13th, we have no meeting next week. No meeting on January 20th. Our next meeting is on the January 27th. Pastor Bill will be gone to officiate his niece's wedding. So there is no meeting on February 3rd, and then February 10th, February 24th, and then our last meeting is March 3rd, which will be not 1 hour, it'll be 2 hours. I also wanted to kind of, when we get to the baptism, or where the River Jordan, we will see other people, other people inside the water. Some will be wearing white sheets. We're going to a different place we went last time. It's a different location, so we haven't been there before. There is question about the environment and the cleanliness of the River Jordan. So that's all when we do their affirmation of baptism, while we're just going to stick maybe a finger in it and then do that. But we're not going to have time to go full immersion. And but I just wanted to let you know, just to be aware of that. If you go online, some people might be drinking the water. I wouldn't recommend that.
No.
If you wanted to bring,
That's getting baptized.
yeah, that's getting baptized. Some people bring something from home, like a plastic bottle or a plastic thing, if you wanted to take some water and bring it back home. We didn't really do that, because we did the affirmation of baptism at the Sea of Galilee. But that's just something, if that's something unique and special for you, prepare for that. We have a couple people that have made travel arrangements and let me know if you want to shoot me an email. The Roberts family and the Adams family are going to spend the night. Okay, and so, all right, so a lot of people, sounds like, are going to spend the night in at SeaTac in a motel before we depart. I have some checklists, and again, these are not, you all have different experiences traveling, and you have your own systems. These are just helpful guidelines. Use what you need, toss what you don't need. Passport, have it with you. Do not pack it in your luggage. Have it on your body. The other thing is, I brought this to pass around. I didn't want people to get confused, because sometimes they say tourist visa. You don't have to apply for this, but when you come into Israel, you'll get a little piece of paper like this. It has to be with you. And so I have a little plastic insert. I don't know what you have with yours. I just stuck it in there, or you can have a paper clip. And I'll pass this around. So you must keep this with you. And then...
But you don't recommend carrying a passport around during the day?
You won't need to, no.
No, when we got to the hotels, we just put it in the safe.
But you will need the little paper?
No, no, you
Okay.
just want to keep that, you just need that to leave.
So those times that you need a passport, you need the little paper?
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
So when we transfer from hotel to hotel, we do take it.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah, you
But,
pack it
yes,
every-
but you won't need it to get anywhere in Israel. But, so you'll just put it in the safe that they have in your room, and in that room, and then when you leave, take it with you, and then put it in the new safe. So that little piece of paper is really important when you leave.
Yeah.
But it's not officially a visa, you don't need to get a visa.
No.
Okay,
So, money. Russ Goodman said we only need American money. I still went got shekels. I still have some that I'm taking back with me. You're welcome to come by and look at what shekels look like, dollar currency. But when because it's so, George, you brought about tourists. There are so many people coming from Europe, Canada, United States, other parts, Israel,
Africa.
all over the world. So you'll see a sign that says shekels, euros, American dollars, 3 different price points. So you really, in my opinion, and I think Pastor Bill, just bring cash, bring some cash to have. Pastor Bill used a lot of his credit card or debit card.
Which, because of the meals being all paid for, there wasn't much of a need for it. And then in a couple of places where I did buy some things, it was in reputable places. But you're not going to want to use your credit cards in Old Town, just Jerusalem and stuff like that. So that's just something, but you know, I did not need to buy, I didn't use a shekel while I was there.
But like, I think when I was at the airport, I was just dying of thirst when we got to Tel Aviv, that I think I used some of my money, or you can use a credit card. But just whatever's comfortable for you and what you are used to, do that. But you do not need to go to Bank of America like me and get my own little shekel money.
Well, didn't, in orientation, he said, he taking $200 and then debit out at the hotel, and then use that at the morgue when he was out here.
We'll get some clarification on
I
that. We
don't
have some time.
I don't remember
We have
that.
some time.
Copies of documents. We're gonna be recycling these, so feel free to come over here and grab one. This is what with me composing this email. I got one of these for my parents. I got one of the hotel lists. I got some extras here. I don't have enough for everybody. I have our flight schedule. I'm giving it to my parents, so they know. I had to put it in their calendar, write it down for them, so they got the date. So if you have someone here on stateside in the United States that you trust, you might want to give some things. We don't anticipate any problems, but sometimes it's good if someone here in the United States has your information to help if something does arise. So feel free to take any of this stuff. Yes, George?
You can also, there's a State Department program that's available to you, it's called SNAP or START or something. You can register your information with the embassy in Israel, your information and also emergency information. So if someone in the States needs to get a hold of you and they can't, they can go to the embassy and it goes the other way too, and it's free. God knows what the situation now with the shutdown is, but I signed up for it and it took like 2 minutes. And just a little extra peace of mind.
So that's would be my recommendation. You don't have to do that. It's up to your discretion. And then the last thing is that I was at I like vintage stuff, so I found this old Holy Land stuff, and I had these acrylic things that I was going to use at school and never did. So you can, these are like probably 40 years ago or something. You can take what you want. I don't want these. So they're free to anybody. I don't have enough for every person, but go ahead, there's different pictures.
The picture of Golgotha, the place of the skull, which we'll talk about later, is really cool and would be, if there, I might like to take this one.
That's why I put it by your
Actually,
table.
I'll probably just I'll take a picture of it because it doesn't look like this anymore because there's a bus station and environmentally it's eroded. So this is one of the possible sites of the tomb of Jesus, and because you hear about this place of the skull, well, you can kind of see like a face in this little rock, and so that's why some people say it must have been here. It's not the primary place where people think it was. But anyway, it doesn't quite look like this because it's eroding because of all the environmental stuff. So this is a picture that's kind of cool. But anyway, okay, so we can look at those.
Yeah, well, you can have them.
We can have them. We don't even have to look at them.
Yes, and I have some ones here with the picture of the old guy that went. But anyway, so go ahead and take them because it is interesting because it does not look like that now. I mean, what you were telling about, we were going like, here's semis going by, trucks and everything. There's all modern life's going on, and then here we are.
This is before and after.
Yeah, a little bit more. Cool.
Just email me if when you make your plans to travel arrangements, and then later on we'll talk about money and we'll talk about giving us your cell phones, because if there's anything that we need to contact anybody or we don't know where you're at, Pastor Bill and I want your cell phone.
Yep. Cool.
And not just one, for if you have a couple, like Melanie and Ed, we would want both of your cell phone numbers.
You didn't save mine from 2.
I still have it.
I probably have it. I have a lot of people.
All right.
All right.
Anything else?
No, thank you. I know we're a little over, and I forgot Julie had some time, so I went a little long. If you're coming up here to look at stuff, this is a book on Magdala. I'm fine to loan this out to anybody. And this is what we got in our packet, this thing on the Holy Land. They might be sending a different kind of version now, but you'll be getting something like this. Okay,
So.
go in peace, serve the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Exciting, more exciting every